There is a country the size of Connecticut that controls more natural wealth per citizen than any nation on Earth. No standing army capable of fighting a superpower. No population large enough to fill a mid-sized American city. Just gas. The largest natural gas deposit ever discovered in human history, sitting beneath shallow water in the Persian Gulf, belonging almost entirely to one tiny peninsula called Qatar. They are not fighting wars for it. They are not drilling it recklessly. They are licensing it to Shell, Total Energies, ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, and Eni, the most powerful energy corporations ever assembled, and collecting the surplus into a sovereign wealth fund that, as of August 2025, held $557 billion in assets, owning Harrods in London, half of Canary Wharf, Heathrow Airport, stakes in Volkswagen, Glencore, Credit Suisse, Miramax, Barclays, the Paris Saint-Germain Football Club, and a $20 billion joint AI venture with Brookfield Asset Management. They own pieces of the world's most powerful infrastructure from a country most people cannot find on a map without help, and they were on the verge of doubling that power. Between 2026 and 2028, Qatar was set to increase its LNG production by 60%. From 77 million tons per year to 126 million tons, in what engineers call the largest single LNG capacity upgrade in human history. 40% of all new global LNG supply by 2029. One country, one gas field, one peninsula. They did not get here by accident. They did not get here by luck. And what happened to them in March 2026 is not the end of the story. See, it is the beginning of a power shift nobody in the conventional financial press has fully explained to you. Stay with me. The heaviest part is coming. The story of how Qatar became the most financially sovereign small state in human history is a story that the global energy industry and the Western financial establishment would prefer you understood only partially. Because the part they prefer you miss is the part that explains how one country, without a seat at the G7 table, without a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, without a single aircraft carrier, came to own a piece of practically everything that matters in the global economy. It begins underground. The North Field natural gas deposit, which sits beneath the shallow waters of the Persian Gulf off the Qatari coastline, or is the largest single accumulation of natural gas ever found on this planet. Not the largest in the region. Not the largest discovered that decade. The largest ever found. Period. It shares a geological boundary with Iran's South Pars field. They are literally the same deposit, split by a maritime border, which is why what happened in March 2026, when Israel struck South Pars and Iran retaliated by hitting Qatar's Ras Laffan industrial city, was not just a military event. It was a geological event. Two strikes on the same underground structure, separated by a maritime line drawn by human negotiators who had no idea what they were sitting on top of when they drew it. Qatar figured out what it was sitting on in the 1970s. The world's energy companies figured it out by the 1990s. And the man who truly understood the strategic implications of it was Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, who in 1995 overthrew his own father in a bloodless coup while the father was on vacation in Switzerland, came back to Doha, cancelled the previous regime's policy of cautious slow extraction, and decided instead to monetize the North Field at a pace and scale that would transform a country of pearl divers into the financial superpower that now owns half of Canary Wharf. Read that again. He overthrew his own father, came home, looked at what the country was sitting on, and decided to change the speed at which history moved. By 2007, Qatar had the highest per capita income in the world. By 2025, the QIA's assets under management had reached $557 billion. By 2026, Qatar's GDP per capita PPP was $121,610. The highest of any Arab nation and among the highest of any country on Earth. And the North Field expansion that was about to come online would have added another 60% to that production base. This was the trajectory. This was the arrow pointing relentlessly upward toward a version of Qatari financial dominance that even its most aggressive advocates had not fully articulated. Then Iran launched its drones and missiles on February 28, 2026, and the trajectory hit something it had never hit before. This video is just the surface. Everything I collected is in the vault. The North Field data, the QIA holdings map, The full breakdown of what the 60% expansion would have meant for global gas prices, the sovereign wealth comparison between Qatar and Dubai, the force majeure contract cascade, the LNG price projections through 2030, over 200 guides, one place, link in the description. But stay here. This is just getting started. On March 2nd, 2026, Qatar Energy issued a statement that moved global energy markets in a way that no single corporate announcement had moved them in years. Due to military attacks on Qatar Energy's operating facilities in Ras Laffan Industrial City and Mesaieed Industrial City in the state of Qatar, Qatar Energy has ceased production of liquefied natural gas and associated products. That sentence went out, and within hours, Dutch and British wholesale gas benchmark prices soared by almost 50%. Asian LNG benchmark prices jumped almost 39%. One statement, one facility, one country the size of Connecticut, 50%. Think about what that means. It means that a single production complex, the Ras Laffan Industrial City, approximately 80 kilometers northeast of Doha, was so foundational to global energy supply that when it stopped producing, the price of gas on two continents moved by half in a single trading session. That is not a vulnerability. That is leverage. That is a form of power that no army creates and no diplomatic arrangement manufactures. It is geological. Iran struck Ras Laffan again on March 18th. The CEO of Qatar Energy, Saad Al-Kaabi, told Reuters the damage wiped out 17% of Qatar's LNG export capacity. The damaged units cost approximately $26 billion to build. The repairs will take 3 to 5 years. The financial loss is estimated at $20 billion in annual revenue, and Al-Kaabi said something that deserves to be played on a loop in every finance ministry on earth. He said the attacks have set the region back 10 to 20 years. 10 to 20 years. The QIA's projected growth to $905 billion by 2030 assumed the Northfield expansion came online on schedule. The Northfield expansion's timeline is now uncertain. The force majeure declarations on long-term contracts to Italy, Belgium, South Korea and China are now active. LNG spot prices in Asia increased over 140% in response to the Ras Laffan halt. Every number in the Qatar wealth story has to be recalculated, and here is where the power shift that nobody saw coming becomes visible for the first time. Now, I need to be honest with you, because honesty is the only thing that gives this kind of analysis any lasting value. Qatar was not humiliating Dubai in the conventional sense before March 2026. Both were growing simultaneously. Dubai was a diversified hub economy running on trade, finance, tourism and real estate. Oil accounted for less than 1% of its GDP. Qatar was a hydrocarbon-anchored economy, using the surplus to buy the world. Gas accounted for close to 40% of GDP. They were different models serving different purposes, and the most accurate statement before the war is that they occupied different lanes of the same Gulf prosperity highway. The QIA at $557 billion dwarfs Dubai's sovereign wealth capacity, but Dubai's 72,500 millionaires, its real estate market, its airport handling 95 million passengers, its DIFC hosting 8,000 registered companies. These are not illusions. They are structural competitive advantages that did not evaporate on February 28th. And the Ras Laffan damage? As catastrophic as the $26 billion construction cost and 3 to 5 year repair timeline suggest, is not the permanent destruction of Qatar's position. The North Field contains enough gas to sustain Qatar's production for over a century. The QIA still holds $557 billion in global assets. 2 of 14 LNG trains were damaged. 12 remain. The leverage that makes gas prices move 50% when Ras Laffan goes offline does not disappear because of a missile strike. It becomes, if anything, more dramatically visible to every energy buyer in Asia and Europe who is now running their own calculation about supply security. The $26 billion repair bill is approximately 5% of the QIA's current assets. Qatar can absorb this. What it cannot absorb easily is the 3 to 5 year delay to the Northfield expansion timeline. The force majeure cascade through its long-term contract book, and the reputational question that now sits in every boardroom where the next long-term LNG supply contract is being negotiated. Can the world rely on Qatari supply security in a region where Iran has demonstrated both the capability and the willingness to strike the world's largest LNG facility during the month of Ramadan? That is the power shift. Not a simple transfer of dominance from Qatar to Dubai, or from either Gulf state to some rival. The power shift is subtler and more dangerous than that, and it operates simultaneously in both directions. Dubai's model, built on zero oil dependency, on the confidence of foreigners, on the airport and the financial center and the real estate market, was tested by the war and found to be structurally dependent on a single guarantee it could not ultimately provide: safety. The Fairmont Palm was struck. The Burj Al Arab had fire damage. The airport was hit 4 times. The safe haven guarantee that justified every premium, the 775 dirhams per night hotel rate, the 86% occupancy, the 9,800 relocating millionaires in 2025, the $63 billion in wealth inflows, was tested and cracked. Qatar's model, built on the deepest gas reserves in human history, on a sovereign wealth fund that owns pieces of the global economy, on long-term contracts with the world's largest energy consumers, was struck physically at its most critical point and suffered damage that will cost $20 billion per year in lost revenue for 3 to 5 years. 2 different models, 2 different vulnerabilities, both exposed by the same conflict. And here is what the financial press is not telling you clearly enough. The $700 billion power shift in the title is not a figure describing money moving from one account to another. It is the cumulative value of what was on the table: Qatar's expansion trajectory, adding hundreds of billions to QIA assets; Dubai's wealth inflows that had reached $63 billion in a single year; the Northfield contract stretching 27 years into the future, all of it suddenly repriced, recalculated, and renegotiated in the light of a conflict neither country asked for and neither country could prevent. The QIA CEO of one of those countries said the attack set the region back 10 to 20 years. The CEO of the world's largest LNG producer, in possession of the world's largest gas field, saying the region is set back 10 to 20 years. That sentence is the power shift. The geological advantage that made Qatar the most financially sovereign small state in human history was always subject to one risk that no sovereign wealth fund can hedge against: being in the neighborhood when the neighborhood goes to war. If you have made it this far, you already know more about the real architecture of Gulf power than 99% of the people watching financial news. Subscribe and share this with someone who thinks the Gulf is just about oil and desert hotels. The next vault opens soon. What is inside is even heavier.